Hey folks, let's take a look at a few rules in section 3.1 dealing with complex numbers, and let's work a few examples. If you will go down please to some rules to remember. These are Math 102 rules. These are things that you have seen before, so this is just a reminder. First thing, always deal with the negatives first. Secondly, you can only multiply and divide the insides and the insides, the outsides and the outsides, but you're never ever allowed to multiply and divide insides and outsides. And then the fourth rule is that you can only add and subtract like terms. Let's put some of these rules into practice. So let's go down to example number 6 first of all. And in example number 6, if we're always going to deal with the negatives first, that's talking about the negative on the inside of the square root. One of the things that we're going to be learning in class is that anytime you have the square root of a negative, that's the same thing as I. So we're going to take the square root of the negative, turn that into an I, and we'll leave the 95 alone where it is. And so the negative from the outside stayed put. The square root of my negative became my I, and the square root of 95 stayed the square root of 95. Now let's jump over to example number 8. First of all, take care of your negatives first. So we see that the square root of a negative is going to be I. So that's going to be the original I that was already there times another I times the square root of 16. An I times an I is simply going to be an I squared. And the square root of 16 we know is 4. I squared, we're going to be finding out, is simply the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1. And when you have two square roots being multiplied together, you know that you're just left with the inside. So that is just going to be a negative 1. Negative 1 times 4 then is negative 4. And if you would jump down to example number 14. Example number 14, this is a multiplying. So all we're going to be doing is FOILing. So let's get the firsts together. Negative 5 times 5 is negative 25. Then your outers, negative 5 times I is negative 5i. Your inners, negative I times 5 is negative 5i again. And then your lasts, negative I times positive I, is going to be a negative I squared. And so you've got your first, outer, inners, and last. Let's combine our like terms. So the middle two terms, negative 5i and negative 5i, that's going to turn into a negative 10i. We just got finished talking about the fact that an I squared is the same thing as a negative 1. So if you have a negative out in front of that, a negative 1 is going to turn into a positive 1. And then you can combine that with your negative 25. So you're going to have a negative 24 minus a 10i, being sure to write that in standard form. Now jump down to example number 16. The first thing that I'd like to do with example number 16 is, instead of seeing this square here, I'd like to simply rewrite the whole quantity a second time. And so this, we're just going to multiply by another 4 minus 3i instead of using the square there. So let's FOIL the second two terms. So once again, you have your firsts are going to be a positive 16. You've got your outers will be a negative 12i, your inners a negative 12i, and your lasts a positive 9i squared. So we can uncover that then. Let's clean that up first of all. So let's take that positive 9i squared. Remember that I squared is negative 1, so this is going to turn into a minus 9. So we can combine like terms. The 2 in the middle, the 12 i's, can be combined, and the 16 and the 9 can also be combined. So we can, when we combine our like terms, we'll have negative 5i times 7 minus 24i. Now let's distribute the negative 5i. And then the last thing that we want to do is this positive 120i squared is going to turn into a negative 120. and then we can rewrite that so that it is inside, there's an I there, so that it's inside of our standard form. Rewrite so it's in the standard form.